So I thought I would talk about myself. I do that fairly often on this channel, I guess. But I want to advertise the. I want to make an argument that there are levels of understanding available to humanity at any given time, but we also have a rough layout of height and depth that is consistent. And what I mean by that is you have the mindset, say, of a simple farmer or a tribesman or something like that. And then you have the mindset of a city slicker or a university student, let's say, or a university associate or something. The higher education today. Okay, actually, no, I want to spell out something else first before I tie it together, basically. I've been hesitant because I don't think it's always the case that secular atheism leads to evil or something. That's not what I want to say. I think it just makes it easier to go to evil. Because if you know about me at all, you might have kind of figured out in a way that when I was a secular atheist leftist, I was a pretty awful person. Doing what I can get away with, basically. No, at least initially, and then I'd be like, "Oh, this feels wrong to do," and then I'd stop doing it, and something like that, and I just kept going through the motions of discover new thing I can do it, whether it's good or bad, learn it's bad. Okay, that thing I don't do, you know, but there was no singular explanation or argument that I could attach to for why different things were bad. Individually, or like a section of things are bad to do, and so on. It was just a vibe, a very blind sort of experience. I could discover that good things are good to do and bad things are bad to do, and they felt good or bad, more or less. Like they felt wholesome or unholy in a way. Like what the religious mean by unholy is like a sick feeling. Or it could be wholesome. And for whatever reason, God recognized me in me, something He put there. So it was always there, but He put it there. That would respond to His call. And in the usual sense, I can in fact look back on my life and say I'm proud of who I am nowadays. Not so much who I was before. Like there's been a legitimate change in the way I approach people and so on. And a very much deeper understanding of relationships with people and how to treat them for maximum smoothness and maximum well-being. Smoothness of relations and well-being for the person genuinely. Um, even if I had even if it were because of my brain learning these things on some level, the answer is I would never have thought of things the way I do now without acts of God. I've had many acts of God in my life. And when the first one started, they were more obvious in the sort of like you get a waking vision and it turns out to correlate with reality a little bit. Or like a prophetic dream that you're like, oh, that was quite an experience and I'm never going to forget it. And spoiler alert, I forgot the second one out of 3. But I remember that it got validated on a rugby field at one point in high school. But and the thing happened. So it was actually a prophetic dream. It wasn't just like complete guesswork. It was like actually like specific details really correlated somehow. You know, like if the color beige was in it, then like maybe it's a pink room or something instead of a beige room or something. Like that's the level of slight difference. Um, you know, like a hot pink room as opposed to a beige pink. Yeah, it's like that level of similarity in some ways between the dreams and the real events. But I didn't understand God as a person. I did gravitate towards the new atheists to some extent. But I didn't like the moral arguments they provided, for the most part. Christopher Hitchens had a way of his. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, like, I care about people, I care about things. I might not know how to behave properly, but, like, I'm doing my best. I'm always doing my best. Even if I suck at it. I mean, even today I was like, I'm exhausted, I can't think anything out. Like, all I could manage was, like, earlier today, is, like, a short video that's, like, a half a gay, it's like a gay joke with Holy Communion. Or, like, it's a gay joke about the Eucharist. And it's like, okay, that's, like, maybe it's a little witty, but, like, when I'm on a roll, I'm, like, coming up with, like, 5 jokes a day. Or, like, wordplay and stuff with, like, multiple layers sometimes and so on. But I was really feeling the sort of Psalms. Like, my soul is in Sheol, but I will wait for the Lord's wrath to pass over me. Until he lifts me up again. And it was kind of like, I've been listening to John Piper and going like, oh, well, that's, like, there's, like, I listened to, like, 2 hours of a book of his, like, on repeat, 1 hour each day for 2 days, while I was sleeping, so I, like, wake up halfway along and, like, subliminally pick up or unconsciously pick up the teachings and so on. And it was like, oh, there's a way to understand these things that's internal to your mental state. And it's not just your mental state, it's like your approach to processing information, your primary mode of processing. And then, like, I began to internalize, almost consume and make part of myself the religious instinct that has been lacking in me to some extent. I might be able to process something and then develop the concept by vibes. But if I can vibe it, then I can explain it. But if I can't vibe it, then I can't do anything with it except wrestle with it. Until hopefully I do. And that happened. And my previous video about the 4 methods of relating to God and yourself and who does what and so on. I can see how it's abusable by people that want God's authority for themselves. And I can understand through that set of possibilities that someone might be able to theoretically excuse bad behavior by shrugging their shoulders and saying like, oh, well, God was acting through me, so it's really God's fault. You know. So that's why I came up with the 4 concepts of relations with God and who does what and what's in situations and how to analyze it, or which levels are highest. And generally speaking, those concepts and levels are... And part of the reason why I said they're all valid, I think, I've been kind of mulling over it and this popped in my head just now, is the better your behavior gets, the better your behavior gets with a good and holy God who's perfect. And it's kind of like anyone can tell you're better behaved. Like you're actually doing positive things for people or solving problems or something within your power. The better you become as a person, the more it becomes about God doing things through you. Whereas at the very basic level of your potential, you're saying, I'm doing good things because I'm good. So that's what they mean, and I kind of used to catastrophize it by saying, like, whenever I do anything, it's bad. Whenever God does anything, it's good, even if I'm suffering because God did this to me. I kind of catastrophized it. And what I want to say is that if you look at it as like a pyramid, right? So you're building upwards from the bottom, but you need the bottom bricks or else everything falls apart. The foundation is self-responsibility, and you do that by understanding that you do things that are good, you do things that are bad, and you try to do good things. That is actually the foundation of moral reasoning, so we don't want to abandon that. But then you can develop on top of it as well. I do things and God makes the world in such a way that the things I can do actually succeed. Or he sets things up for me to fail at because it's not healthy for me, let's say. And there's a certain faith in God's character and nature and treatment of you, even if things are a little hard at times or really hard at times and so on. It's about trusting the future in some way. Yeah, it's about trusting the future in some way because the character of the guy who made it all is good and they love you. But that's not something you're ready for yet when you're on those two. You're not ready on the first stage, the foundational stage. But you can begin to get ready for that on the third stage or the next stage, and so on, up. And then you might say something like, as equal to that stage of God sets things up for me to win at, that God can just give you things while being totally useless completely. So there's nothing you can give God. Except what they say is your faith and obedience. And that leads to good works or actions. So there's a dual option here for yourself and for other people in terms of what you're doing. But that's not the first level. That's like the second out of 3 levels. And it's a bit split. And then you advance to another level of complexity that's the top one that I know of at the moment. I think it'll be the top one that I understand for my entire life, to be honest. Where the previous levels are valid in some way, but also on top of that, God works through you and God works through other people. And the idea is once you've developed up until that point, keeping intact and legitimate the previous levels, then you can get to the point where you're like, if you even decide you choose God, you kind of lock into something about relationships with other entities like people, animals, God, and so on. That is the highest level of relationship because people are more complicated than anything else in the universe, and God is more complicated than anything in the universe. So you're hitting a more complicated system and like thing to deal with, and so on. And what that means is it's real, it's super complicated, but if you notice, there's like a technological mimicry of this, or like a or like for instance, the mechanical sciences led to the digital sciences, or the mechanical sciences led to the electrical sciences, which led to the digital sciences, which led to the AI sciences. There's an advancement of simple things to more complicated things to some extent, in many ways, where we're mimicking life and consciousness and so on increasingly But at the same time, we come from a position where we were using rocks and sticks to make spears. And a rock is mechanical, purely, and a stick is biological. And like the great advancements that started humanity are farming and irrigation and pottery for drinking water and so on. The first ones. And we getting increasingly synthesized or artificial in a way, and it feels artificial in the usual sense. And we're moving away from actual life forms more often with our technology. And like the, you look at the concrete jungle as opposed to the trees based jungle, and it's like, okay, it's kind of off somehow. So we have to maintain having a little space of our own with a little bit of wilderness, even if it's kind of a garden kind of thing, um, to be healthy and well off as people. If we're just shut up in our apartments, some people might be built for that, but a lot of people probably, if they had cheap access to big houses, would pick big houses, and they would pick wooden houses over concrete and steel houses. Unless it's the foundation so it doesn't leak water or something like that, you know what I mean? Foundation can be concrete. I mean, that's what a basement's for. So we have to get back to life. And you can see the development of the artificialization of ourselves in the concrete jungle and in AI girlfriends and boyfriends and so on. The internet sort of artificialized human relations in a way that didn't exist before. I was kind of born before it happened. Yeah, I grew up before the internet existed most of the way. Growing up, like 14 years old when I started using the internet. Yeah. So I had an experience of like running around the neighborhood with kids and friends, myself, and like just playing with in yards and stuff like that, and like telephoning people at like specific times because you couldn't count on them being beside the telephone if you didn't tell them to be, because they couldn't carry their phone. Cell phones were like $10,000, and you like that's like a wage for like a person for a year back then. Although $10,000 went a lot further too, so that's not all bad. It's actually a good wage back then. Actually, no, maybe 30,000. But still, it's like 120,000 now, basically, or like $100,000 now. Yeah. So, anyways, um, I don't think anyone really is going to believe me about the prophetic record necessarily, except maybe one or two or three people. Because I learned that the search results for Google Trends on the search terms I provided in my prophecy video actually are different for different people around the world. So it didn't line up the way I thought it would exactly. It's not hard proof after all. But if you want proof of God's necessity for advancing morally to a certain degree, my character is the argument outside of my logical explanations. And the thing is, I would not have been able to analyze basically what the right considers common sense, and I would not have been able to understand it if it weren't for acts of God forcing me to think on human relations instead of being just purely autistic and a shut-in. I might still be bad at it naturally, but if God hadn't have intervened and showed me all the experiences I've had, I wouldn't have these understandings of human relations. And he's always been there for me, basically, a couple dark nights of the soul, so to speak, when he's been silent. But he's been there for me, basically teaching me how to think about things to the point that I can actually socialize. I like crack jokes and like lighten up and like think deeper than before, even before I started doing drugs, about the various conditions of the human race and come up with solutions to culture and societal norms of attitudes and belief structures that I think is going to help people in the future, if not now. And the thing is, if anyone looks at my claims to knowing prophetic people and so on as schizo, you can also look at my intellectual work, piecing together things logically and rationally. And basically, those two come from the same source. They come from God. Now, one of the things I have said is maybe God led me on a bit of a wild goose chase for a while, intellectually, in some kinds of ways, as part of a necessary teaching of how to relate to people. But something about it tells me he's not totally joking about his promises that I believe he'll make, or he's made, sorry. And I think one of them is that my ex is going to come back. I'm really hard locked on that one, basically. That's what I've been working towards this last 8.5 years of being apart from her and so on. Something about it. Something about this God entity, this thing. See, the thing is, I don't see hallucinations. I don't see things that aren't there. I don't hear things that aren't there unless I've done a lot of weed or something, which I haven't done for 4.5 years. I don't feel things that aren't there. I don't taste things that aren't there. I don't smell things that aren't there. I just have some experiences that make me think God exists and he's communicating with me. Some sort of like some really hardcore sort of weird instances that were rapid fire and at really intense occasions of this happening. And I don't mean like the occasion felt intense. I mean like it was just like rapid fire, short period of time, lots of these incidents where something was said by someone that sounded almost identical to a reasonable answer to a thing I was thinking of back in the day. And then it sort of Pavlovian conditioned into like something a lot more subtle. And I don't think the thing that organized such rapid fire intensity of occurrences patterns for so long of meaningful incidents that were things coincidentally happening that were actually quite reasonable and so on. I don't think it would trick me all of a sudden and go like, oh, now you're just delusional and I just set you off to delusion and God's talking to you, but you're doomed to suffer forever. Yeah. That's even though you kind of want to be on his good side and do what he wants and so on. That's another caveat. I should add that little last bit there. So it's like there's something in me that God knew because He put it there that would reach out to Him if He called me. And I understand fully the logic of it's not fair that God might have chosen someone to go to hell from the beginning in a blank manner. Because that is the unescapable logic in some ways. But another way of putting it is maybe hell is there for people that would prefer it. So like if a soul is going to reject God no matter what, its creator no matter what, and it's not like a parent in the usual sense, like they like to call God the Father and so on, and there is a paternalistic, caring, protection, nurturing, and cultivating element to it. But if you're going to reject the thing that literally created literally everything, no matter what, you're going to reject them? I mean, it's kind of like what do you expect is going to happen to you? I reject the source of candy. Well, I guess you don't get candy. you know? So I can see the reason why people kind of autistically hate religion or autistically support things that don't make a lot of sense in the usual way. But there's an element of truth both to the element of God's the Father who cultivates, nurtures, protects, and provides for those who love Him. And it makes a lot of sense that if someone rejects the source of literally everything they've ever enjoyed at all, they're going to get something they don't enjoy. It makes a lot of sense. Both can be true. And if you have to worry about whether you love God or not, the answer is you probably kind of do love God, actually, is my suggestion. I've moved into a position that's not exactly necessarily universalism, as in everyone goes to heaven eventually and so on, but it's also not necessarily like you have to be officially Christian to be going to heaven. And That isn't an explanation that like it's a good idea to just go like I don't care about God, I don't care about Christianity, I don't care about Jesus, I don't care about uh, faith, and I don't care about your higher ideals. I just want to go and do some smack or something like that. That's not the right approach to it. If you're now, there's a caveat to even that not being the right one, which is if you're coming from a position of wounding, of sheer suffering, and so on, and anguish. I'm reasonably sure God will accept not your rejection of Him out of a sense of I just don't give a damn about Him whatsoever, no matter even if He is God. Um, but rather sort of like, how do I know I can trust God? And that's why I don't believe in Him. Because I don't trust the source and the order and principle of the universe. It's a very you can shrink as a person with a mean world attitude. You can grow as a person with some element of faith in the future being taken care of by someone else for you, or yourself for yourself, or yourself for other people. And that's also one of the reasons why the lower levels of the foundations and so on of the pyramid of those relations with God is valid. You're just at a lower level. You might be really recalcitrant about not getting to a higher level, but you're at least on a certain level validly. Um, and basically, what I was at was I was at the lower level, doing my best but sucking. And what happens is some people get to the higher levels of that conceptualization, um, and they hit the second level, and so on. And then some people hit the third level. And I'm sure that there's people that have like a flip between good things is when God works through me, and bad things is when I do good things under my own power, chasing the good or God or whatever you want to call it. Um, However, I will state, quite frankly, this God of mine has blatantly taken care of my needs in crises over and over again. Yes, through other people, so I thank them as well. I thank the person that God works through, and I thank God for it. But, like, he's literally been like, here's a beer and cigarettes when I've asked for them in a prayer. Like he's done it like 30 times in 5 or 6 or 7 years. Like, it's a lot of times that I've just randomly gotten a beer and cigarettes because I prayed for them. And that should color your understanding of God in a way. He's willing to give you something you desire, even if it's not literally the best of in the usual sense of understanding. You know, one should not drink alcohol much, one should not smoke so many cigarettes, or they should quit smoking cigarettes. But he's willing to give you something you desire to show he cares about you. It's just not he's just not going to give you everything you want all the time based on just what you happen to want in the moment. He's not interested in cultivating rampant hedonism, chasing highs. He wants you to appreciate that your needs are going to be taken care of. But he also wants you to understand, I'm sure, that he's looking out for your desires where they don't conflict with your needs, or they're not totally against your needs. The needs will win out when they conflict, but the desires aren't totally something he hates when they're valid. And it can be a matter of you just don't see how something you absolutely needed to avoid a catastrophe leads to the good thing. But what I'm learning gradually is sort of like after a period of testing and hardship and disasters and so on, I'm beginning to experience God nurturing me, giving me little treats to reestablish a more consistent trust in Him from the things that traumatized me heavily. And there's a gradual lessening of the desire for the various four idols: wealth, pleasure, power, honors. Or, like, for me, it's a little different because I've kind of been starved of pleasure for the most part for a long time. So it's like a little bit of more pleasure in the, like the just like sugary treats, some chocolate, some cheese, extra meat, stuff like that. You know, like I've really been really mug-like in my denial of my nutrition in some ways at times. I kind of blow up. Like I buy like stuff for like 2 days and then run out of like half my money, and then like I really spend like 2 or 3 weeks piecemealing my the stronger parts of nutrition. Let's say like I'll eat peanut butter instead of meat or something. But he's gradually nurturing that part in my life upwards. So it's not like he's totally against you having that at all, which I understand someone might be afraid of if they hear God gives you what you need, not what you want. It's about preventing wealth or power or honors, which means reputation in some sense, the obsession with reputation, and pleasure. It's about not worshiping those things, but allowing yourself to enjoy them to moderate degrees. And it's not like you have to be really strict entirely on all of it all the time, but delayed gratification where you put it off a little bit so you get more of it later, or some sort of deeper satisfaction that isn't like the basic version of those things, but sort of more advanced experience of well-being. is part of their God's lesson. So it's about trusting God to provide everything you need in the end, not in the sense of you're born, you suffered 50 years, then you die, then you go to heaven. But in the sense of like, lots of people can, in fact, be born, grow up reasonably comfortable and secure. Most people can do that. Get a job and make some good money. Get a hot husband or wife. Have some children. Enjoy your life. Get some grandchildren. Have company in your old age and people to talk to, and something you can do to help your family and feel good for doing before you die, and then you go to heaven on top of it. Not everyone's going to experience the second one. And I do agree that people might risk giving up on ever getting that. But I think one of the credits to my soul in how God made me in the first place is, and this is important to me personally, is that all of my efforts politically, which is why I'm too honest to stay woke, but I'm also kind of like moving away from like pure anti-woke necessarily, kind of like a sort of I'm grumpy towards the woke, but I'm trying to give them a place in society that if they and the right agree on, everyone can be relatively happy. Is When I saw the Dark Ages coming to our civilization, I basically started talking and arguing for everything that I could think of to resolve it societally. Even this entire existential crisis guide and toolkit, my videos on YouTube, is basically one long chain of evolving efforts to solve societal problems that led to us basically having a dark ages in Western civilization. And the logic from the beginning was really simple. I can't fend for myself in the usual ways, but I do know how to solve complicated problems. And I do understand social dimensions and historical evolution of systems and cultures and societies and civilizations and so on. That's why I can predict the problems in the first place. So I'm going to bend my mind and will to the pursuit of taking care of society so society can take care of me. That's my argument from the beginning. There's a definite sort of explanation why the increasingly weak men gravitate towards activism and socialism and so on. Because hyper-focus on competency and ruthless competition within a company is really nasty for those who aren't good at things. And that's a product of corporations, corporatism. But what I want to say is that small businesses and family businesses Doesn't matter if they're cooperatives or family businesses or um, corporations if they're small. They all gravitate towards being relatively good. There's always going to be bad bosses. And there's going to be bad employees. That's just part of life. But you shouldn't let the fact that they can exist at all poison you on whether workers deserve good wages or private property should exist. Both are true. The only argument then is how do we get there? And exactly what you're willing to sacrifice to get there. And the clever people are the ones that can sacrifice the least important stuff on either of those two competing propositions for maximum gain. And that's why you have to be honest with yourself and curious and listen to the opposition at times, even if you really hate them, for the occasional good idea. You don't have to commit entirely to the opposite necessarily. You might gravitate towards it gradually or something, but not entirely there. But those two competing propositions, workers deserve good pay and private property should exist. If you think about it, a family business or a small business of good, strong, smart workers who are effective and efficient, the point of that is to maximize both and cooperatives. Right? Like the idea is those three systems, when you combine them, provide the most value in every way possible, with exception to the cost of items. And the reason why we don't want unfair business practices is so that a reasonable cost can be accrued for the items that a business is selling. Some accurate representation of the minimally high price that still gives a bit of profit to the seller, so they have something out of it, and you get something out of the cheapest thing possible. And we do in fact want some form of regulating mechanism to minimize artificially low prices to price out the competition of the family business or whatever else, so that you can take the business, monopolize it, and then charge an arm and leg for the same service you were charging 10 cents for previously. And the most honest mechanism I can give you is natural selection or free market competition. If you become bloated and inefficient, then you go out of business. If you're ruthless and cutthroat in the market, then you might not get the best workers because they can't stand you. And big business likes to participate and partner with big government. And really, that's the problem. When we had more of a free market and less governmental regulation and so on, what naturally occurred is that the big businesses were like 200 people, not like 10,000 people. or there was like a warehouse for on a dockyard in one place and a warehouse on a dockyard in another, and like the same company owned them, and like they would they would be the one you go through to go from one city to another and vice versa. But there would probably be like multiple companies with dockyards, so there'd be competition even in the trans. You know what I mean? So like they keep each other honest. Yeah, and that really is something you can't organize centrally, because the by taking the power for yourself centrally as a singular entity, you make everyone's manipulation efforts on you skyrocket. And it literally is as simple as like, if there's 25 businesses, then you're gonna, like, if you manipulate one business to do something that benefits you like a little bit, you're only like, it's not worth it. It's not worth manipulating it. But if it has the power of life and death, then you're going to try and manipulate it. And I'll end with one last thing, which is God cannot be manipulated. That's why the attention should be on God and what He wants, because He is the power of life and death, and He cannot be manipulated. Now, by manipulated, I mean He knows everything, so you can't fool Him. If you've got a really bad reason for doing something and you're like, I'm just going to tell everyone it's a good reason, then you're either dumb because you don't realize it's a bad idea, or you're evil because you know it's a bad idea and you're going to do it anyways. So God keeps people honest, and so on. Now, I realize none of these arguments are exactly proof of God existing, but these are the effects and the impacts of God existing. And I think you'll find if you use those 4 concepts I gave, me working for the good because I choose to, God organizes the world so I can succeed in getting what I want, or I do something useless and God gives me what I want anyways, or when I do good things for myself and other people, God is working through me. When other people do good things for themselves and other people, God is working through them. I think you might find some success, and you might just experientially realize that there's something to this God thing, and it actually works in a way. It'll be subtle, but you'll be able to like start picking up on like, oh, that actually works. So this is more of a description video and a little insight into like how to approach things, and like, I believe in God, but like using those 4 concepts and putting them in their proper place and going like, one is the lowest but it's valid on a certain level, and one is the highest and I don't always know how to apply it. You can find a certain success that suggests there is something to God existing, because that's the source of how I learned that conceptual landscape. Anyways, I'll leave it there. But yeah, I guess an hour was a long time to talk.